Hello, I'm Rob, and this is North Country History with Rob Berg. Forests can be all around us, and sometimes they're right next door and we don't even realize it. Today I want to talk about a forest known as the Saginaw Forest that sits just outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan in Scioto Township. And it's a historic forest dating back more than 120 years. And it's one that I finally visited for the first time this past November. And it has a rich history, and we're going to talk a little bit about it today. So settle in, sit back, and enjoy. North Country History with Rob Berg, your podcast on the forest history of the Great Lakes region. The Saginaw Forest is a property of the University of Michigan, and it is located, as I mentioned, in Scioto Township, just under 5 miles west of the main campus of the University of Michigan off of Liberty Road. It's an 80-acre parcel that is owned by the University of Michigan, operated by their School for the Environment and Sustainability, known as SEAS, S-E-A-S, and it is the successor to the original School of Forestry that was established at the University of Michigan in 1903. And then its successor, the School of Natural Resources. So it's evolved. The same root program that started as the School of Forestry, and it was started as the experimental forest for the forestry students so they could learn forestry firsthand. It's a beautiful site that was basically started by two men. Arthur Hill, who was a University of Michigan regent, who purchased the land and then bequeathed or donated it then to the University of Michigan. And he had been a Michigan lumberman who was well known in the Saginaw area. And because he was from Saginaw, he had requested that the name of the area be called the Saginaw Forestry Farm. And that's what it was called from 1903 to 1919, when basically the farming part of developing into a forest ended, and it just became known as the Saginaw Forest. And it is an area, as I mentioned, that's a beautiful area. Its central area is dominated by a small lake called Third Sister Lake. If it's called Third Sister Lake, there must be a first and second sister, right? And yes, there is. To the east of the Saginaw Forest is Wagner Road. That is not a major thoroughway, but a predominant secondary road in Scioto Township there. It connects Jackson Road to the north to Liberty Road, and it continues down almost all the way to the city of Saline, and it goes as far north as the Hudson River, the Huron River. I said Hudson because there was a park there called Hudson Mills farther upriver. But so on Wagner Road, just to the east of it, is where First Sister and Second Sister lakes are, and they're part of an Ann Arbor city park called Dolph Lake, because Wagner Road, kind of around that area, serves as the boundary between Ann Arbor and Scioto Township. So anyways, modern geography there, and but the Saginaw Farm was the closest place for the forestry students to be able to learn and practice forestry. Most forestry programs, and that included the University of Michigan, did have camps where the students would go to during the summertime to learn more about forestry, firsthand work. And Michigan's forestry camp, beginning in 1929, operating up into till 1987, was called Camp Philbert Roth, and that was located in Iron County in the Upper Peninsula. That was the second location, the permanent location. Prior to that, it was located in temporary quarters in a former logging camp in Alger County near Munising. And so Camp Philbert Roth was named after the second person who was important for the development of the forestry program at the University of Michigan, and that was Philbert Roth. And I'd mentioned him in our season 1 episode on the birth of reforestation, because in 1903, when he was hired as the University of Michigan's first forestry professor and head of the forestry school, he was also hired by the state of Michigan as the first superintendent of forests of the forest reserves at Higgins Lake and Houghton Lake, and as part of that also the Higgins Lake nursery that was established in 1904. So both Arthur Hill and Philbert Roth helped to kind of start the School of Forestry. There were others, and I will talk about this more specifically, in future episodes. We'll talk about the different forestry schools in the Great Lakes region in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Ontario, and how they train foresters. But just focusing here on Michigan and the Saginaw Forest, we won't get into all of those details today. But so the Saginaw Forest was a great place for the students to go to, like I said, not far off of campus. And Michigan State Agricultural College, the now at Michigan State University, they had similar things up there in East Lansing. Michigan Tech, another forestry program here in the state of Michigan, had their forestry camps and nearby forest as well up there in the northwestern Upper Peninsula. So this was not an uncommon thing for them to have. When I went out to Maine a couple of years ago now, a year and a half, and I visited the experimental forest for the University of Maine's forestry program. So there you have it. Wherever there's forestry schools, they have their local forest where they do their training at and studies. And the Saginaw Forest was one that was created on exhausted farmland. Washtenaw County, where Ann Arbor is, where Scioto Township is prime agricultural land. At least it was. It's now getting heavily developed urban and suburban development, so not as much farming anymore. But this area had been farmed, and it no longer was being farmed land anymore. And Arthur Hill, he purchased it. He purchased the 80 acres and then bequeathed it to the University of Michigan, signed it over for them to start their forestry program there. And they learned all different things. First of all, they had to get the land ready for planting. And they did tear down they moved a barn that was located on the property. They maybe in hindsight would have kept that barn because they found that they needed places to store equipment there at the Saginaw Forest, and they would build facilities for that later, starting within 1915, a building that started out as a storage building, but then was turned into a caretaker's home, was built of fieldstone. They didn't want to build it of wood. This is a forestry program, but they did not build it out of lumber or very little lumber because they were concerned about fire hazards or, a chance of fire out there, which was quite a ways away from, the city of Ann Arbor at the time, and where there would have been, fire protection. So they built it mostly of fieldstone, and it's a beautiful building. And on my Facebook page, to go along with this episode, I will have some photos from my November 2025 hike out there. It was a beautiful fall day. So I took quite a few photos of it, and I'll share those on my Rob Berg Environmental Historian Facebook page. but it's you know, they realized it as they were developing it. Okay, we need this, we need that, and it was just like everything else. There wasn't necessarily a big, long range plan for it to start. They just kind of created it as they went along. And there's a fantastic white pine plantation there on the north side of Third Sister Lake. You don't see a lot of great white pine stands in the lower and southern Michigan, southeastern Michigan. And of course, if you do see them, they're almost always plantings. And this one was no different. But they planted a lot of other species of trees there. But they learned how to thin those forests. They learned how to do all the studying. They surveying in there. Before they started Camp Filbert Roth, each summer, or not each summer, but the summer between the sophomore and junior years of forestry students, they had to go to a surveying camp. And the University of Michigan had one. It was called Camp Davis, and it was at Douglas Lake up in the northern tip of the Mitten, just outside of the Mackinac city area, kind of between there and Pellston. And that's where the University of Michigan has their biological camp for studying and for all of their environmental science classes and biology classes, things like that. But that was the original location of this camp called Camp Davis, and it was for surveying, for civil engineers and anybody else who needed to learn how to do surveying. Foresters needed to know how to do surveys in the forest. That was particularly a important position for the landlookers who were looking at the lumber, and that would be a job that foresters would have to do in their professionalism or their professional work, is how to survey a forest, how to do land looking at the amount of timber that was standing. So they would also do some of that down at the Saginaw Forest as well. And some of these things that they wanted to do out there, or that they did out there, some of it came by the request of Arthur Hill. And I'm going to get a little into Arthur Hill here, who was the instigator for, the creation of the forest. And I found some information online. Arthur Hill was inducted a number of years ago into the Saginaw Walk of Fame, or Saginaw Hall of Fame, sorry. And so this is the information that I found on the Saginaw Hall of Fame website, and that information I'll have in the notes, the show episode notes on the website. So here is what Arthur Hill, 1846 to 1909, and I'll just read a few excerpts here. Is sedate, dignified Arthur Hill, whose name was perpetuated by his thoughtful and important philanthropies, was one of the most cultured Saginaw multimillionaires whose fortunes were grounded in the lumber industry. Hill achieved great wealth with lumber holdings, but also in mining, steamship lines, and railroads. Arthur Hill was born March 15, 1846 in St. Clair, Michigan. He came to Saginaw in 1856 when his father opened a small sawmill. There he learned how to sort logs and how to measure the mill's daily output. Young Arthur attended public schools and proved an apt and industrious student. One of his discerning teachers pleaded with Arthur's father to give the boy a college education. The elder Hill finally agreed, and Arthur was graduated in 1865 from the University of Michigan with a degree in civil engineering. So not only was he a later regent of the University of Michigan, he was an alumni too. He got his degree in civil engineering, and that is a degree that would be very valuable in the lumber industry. For 7 years after college, young Hill was a landlooker, estimating quantities of timber on tracts of vacant state or federal land. Sturdy of body, he often carried grub packs for days through remote reaches of forest. So landlooker and timber cruiser are interchangeable names. Now, timber cruiser specifically for the lumber industry, a landlooker would be looking for holdings for multiple uses, for timber. It could be for mining operations. There's a number of different industries in the forest, or over land use, could be using landlookers. So here he later Arthur Hill and Company Limited became one of the wealthiest firms of its time, holding office in several other concerns and stock in many others. Hill had interests all over the United States. His lumber empire was widespread. He served 3 terms as mayor of Saginaw City. That's now the west side of Saginaw. There was once Saginaw City and East Saginaw, and they merged at one point. He served on the Saginaw City Council, or Saginaw City School Board, for 6 years. Saginaw Arthur Hill High School is named after him. In 1901, Hill was named a regent of the University of Michigan, which he befriended liberally with gifts of lasting and pronounced educational worth. When Hill died in Saginaw, that's not necessary there. Besides the Saginaw Forest, he also gave $200,000 to the University of Michigan for an auditorium, and its Hill Auditorium still stands today. I went to a concert last month there, and the acoustics in there are fantastic. In 1903, when the University of Michigan established its forestry department, Hill, then a regent, bought 80 acres of outworn, cleared farmland 3 miles west of Ann Arbor and deeded it to the university. He specified that it be named Saginaw Forestry Farm. 16 years later, students and faculty members had transformed it from a farm into a forest. The regents officially changed the name to Saginaw Forest. The property is especially valuable because it offers so many different kinds of trees to study in such a compact area, and because complete records of plantings and other operations have been maintained there right from the beginning. Altogether, more than 50 species ranging from western yellow pine to black walnut have been planted. Change the page here. Sorry, I have it stapled, so it makes it difficult. No one block of 80 acres has played a more important part in the development of forestry in the United States than the Saginaw Forest. That was from S.T. Dana, Dean Emeritus of the University of Michigan School of Natural Resources. He once said, "Here many students have gained useful experience in nearly every branch of forestry, have had an opportunity to improve their finances, and have had a thoroughly good time." With the going out there to study, they'd have, a number of speakers come in to speak. They had, they would have social gatherings out there right by the land, or the caretaker's cabin, the stone structure there. There's a nice, really big fire ring for campfire programs, and having done campfire programs in state parks, it's great. It's a very low-key, laid-back way of, learning. And you have the fire there and the speaker coming there. And imagine, here I spoke in programs at state parks about lumber history. And I'm talking about things that were happening, a century or more in the past. But here in the teens, the 20s, up even into the 50s, you might have had old lumbermen come in to talk who were, speaking about things in their lifetime and their personal experiences. And that was a fantastic way for, learning about what happened here in Michigan. And then you had, those that were the at the beginning of the reforestation. Philbert Roth, he led the program, the forestry program there, from 1903 to 1923. And Daddy Roth, as he was called by his students very affectionately, he was a mentor to hundreds, if not thousands. I don't know how big the program was, so I shouldn't say thousands, but to hundreds of students. And, he was a German native or immigrant, and he had learned at some of the great early forestry programs, the Biltmore School down in North Carolina, which was the kind of the blueprint for all forestry programs in the United States. And that was a program that was out in the middle of the forest in the Biltmore Forest. They're outside of Asheville, North Carolina, on the big Vanderbilt estate there. And Karl Schwenk, who was a forester from Germany, a European-trained forester, which were all of the original foresters in the United States, were trained in trained in Germany or other parts of Europe, and they are the ones who brought their skills, their knowledge here to the New World, as they commonly said, to teach forestry to a new generation of foresters here in the United States. And Canada likewise had the same thing happening up there at the same time. You heard firsthand from Philbert Roth, who had learned from the original forester in the United States, or forestry professor, Karl Schwenk. So it was, a very great way to learning, as I said, around those campfires. And I came across a blog from 2015 from the caretaker at the time, and they apparently were doing 2-year residencies, the caretakers for the University of Michigan at the Saginaw Forest there. And this caretaker, she wrote about, preparing the campfire area and for lumberjack days or for a crosscut sawing competition there for them during one of their campfires. And so you had entertainment there and learning the skills. How many use a crosscut saw today in the 21st century? Not many, but they still learn those same skills, using the crosscut saw, using the axe, just like their predecessors had to use a century beforehand. And so this was a great, way of learning. And the nice thing is with the University of Michigan, there's always a love-hate relationship with a large university and the city or community that they're home in. There's always a lot of pressure. But the University of Michigan allows public use of much of their lands. The Nichols Arboretum, which is near the Huron River, right in the city of Ann Arbor, right as part of the U of M's main campus area and near the North Campus. It's beautiful gardens area and some forests in there, and it's basically one really big giant park. And that's the same with the Saginaw Forest. The 80 acres of the Saginaw Forest is, they've got a lot of trails through there, and they have a new public parking area that's in the little kind of industrial commercial park I shouldn't say little, it's a good sized one that's adjacent to it off of Wagner Road, because there's no parking along the Liberty Road entrance. You can't park in front of the gate there. The university still needs to use that gate as an access. It's for their main road going into the property there, pardon me. And so for people to park, they used to park in a nearby residential area there off of Liberty Road. But, I'm sure the residents weren't happy about that. And finally, a mega church that's located in that industrial commercial area allowed an easement, or somehow they did it for an access, a small walking trail into the east side of Saginaw Forest. And that's an interesting area there, because where that mega church is, that area used to be a facility. It was called Gelman Sciences. And I'm not sure exactly what they manufactured. I haven't looked into that at all. But unfortunately, as part of the side effects of their manufacturing facility there, they were producing dioxin. And the dioxin leached into the groundwater in the area. And places like Third Sister Lake there in the Saginaw Forest, dioxin was detected in it in the mid-1980s. And unfortunately, the dioxin bloom has spread quite a bit, and this is into the watershed of the Huron River, and so it is slowly making its way, if it hasn't by now, to the Huron River. And so they know that in the 1980s it was identified of dioxin there in the water, but it could have been in there as early as the mid 60s when they started operations. And that's the drawback, of course, of any type of industrial work is the environmental degradations. We've talked about it here in North Country history with the lumber industry and the environmental impact. But in mining, with the great copper mines and iron mines, there's been a lot of chemicals leaching into the groundwater from that, and that happens not just with the heavy metals in iron and copper, but I did an internship in 1996 in central Pennsylvania, and that was in an area of coal and steel, and in the coal mines they had the same thing of the leaching of a variety of chemicals into the water, and that has done a lot of drastic problems for the environment there. But so they're able to do that studying now, especially with the new aspect of the program as the School of the Environment and Sustainability. It's the environmental sciences programs at the University of Michigan. So this is part of it. So this is now a fantastic learning area, lab, a learning lab for the environmental sciences, where it's no longer forestry focused. It has gone to natural resources, and they did a lot of studying there of the wildlife, of the flora and fauna of the Saginaw Forest, and of the aquatic life in Third Sister Lake. And now they're looking at even more specific aspects here in the new look of it, of the School of the Environment and Sustainability, or SEAS as its acronym it's called. But so this is, just a place that I'd been driving by it for years. Some days when I drive to work from Chelsea to Ann Arbor, I decide to take, the scenic route, and I'll go some of the back roads. And eventually I'll get onto Liberty Road, and I'll come in Liberty because Liberty connects to Maple Road, which is where my store is that I work at. I'm just up Maple, just a little bit from Liberty. So it's a nice back way in if I'm not in a rush. And if it's a nice, beautiful day, heck, I've done it in rain downpours. We're now getting our early spring rains, even though it's not really spring. But I'm recording this on Sunday, March 8th, and this is launching on Monday, March 9th. Daylight savings time just began. So, yes, it's been a little bit of a hectic time trying to get that figured out. But anyways, I drove in yesterday in a decent rainstorm on my way to work, and I went by there. And yeah, walking out in the woods in a rainstorm is still better than, the best day at work. So, it's this forests are kind of all around us. And yes, this one has some history, and it really ties right directly into the podcast. So I knew I'd be talking about it sooner or later. But just the way my schedule's been so far this year, I really had no idea what I was going to do for a podcast episode for this week. If you heard this last week's episode, and I said it would be a mystery one for today, and I had kicked around a couple of ideas. Well, this was one particular one, and it stuck. And so I'm glad I'm able to share it with you all today. When you're in Ann Arbor, take a drive down Liberty Street from the University of Michigan campus. Liberty connects into State Street, which is right there, right at the main part of Central Campus. The diag is right along Liberty or State Street. So take Liberty all the way west, coming out from Ann Arbor. You're going to go out through the city there from the downtown out into the residential area, and then you'll get to the Stadium Boulevard, the business districts there, up to Maple Road, and then crossing I-94, Wagner Road, and just past Wagner on Liberty is where the main old entrance is. But again, not the main public entrance anymore. That's behind, I think it's called 242 Church. I'm not sure if that's the correct name. In the kind of the business park there off of Wagner Road. And you'll see a parking area, and there's a nice key, signs there for Saginaw Forest. And they've got a little covered picnic area, picnic shelter as you walk into the main forest area. And I believe restrooms and snacks are available at the church there too, though I didn't go in the day I was there. But so it's a nice spot to visit, and you get some really good walking in there. I think I did almost 3 miles walking on the beautiful fall day, November 14th. Which was a very unseasonable fall day for us. I believe it was in the 60s when I was out there that day. So almost the same, mirror to what it is today at the beginning of March. And it was in the 60s today or very close to it with some beautiful sun as well. So, it's great to get outdoors and get into the forest and breathe in that forest air. Pick up some of that spirituality in there if that's what you feel. Kind of commune with the forest, however it makes you feel. This is a nice spot to do it, just really almost within the city limits of Ann Arbor. So within a decent-sized metropolitan area. Ann Arbor is well over 100,000 people in there now. I don't know the exact population, but then you add in the University of Michigan, which has another 40 or so thousand people, 40,000 or so students in there, and it's a large community. And around the Saginaw Forest, it's really getting swallowed up. What used to be open land, farmland, it's all now subdivisions. There's so many going in, and there's going to be a new one going in directly north of the Saginaw Forest. It's going to be right up on its north boundary. And to the west boundary a bit of it too. So it's happening here all over the place. So that is in the nutshell is the Saginaw Forest that I wanted to speak to you about today. But hey, I also want to give a little promo for next week's episode. Next week I'm going to have my first guest of season 3, Emily McGillivray. And Emily is a former college professor at Northland College in Ashland, Wisconsin. Unfortunately, Northland shuttered its doors this past June. One of the many smaller private colleges, universities that have really gotten into the crunch in the post-pandemic era. And Emily was a history professor there and specializing in Lake Superior, Great Lakes history, indigenous people history. And I came across her site, The Outdoors Historian, on Facebook and Substack last year. And we started communicating, and we realized we'd be good collaborators. And she'd asked if she could collaborate with me on the podcast. So found a very good episode for her to debut with in March in honor of Women's History Month. We have an episode next week on March 16th, I believe, on Susan Johnston. And Susan Johnston, that was her Anglo name. She was an Ojibwe woman, born and raised in the Chequamegon Bay area of what's now Wisconsin, Lake Superior, and that's the area where Emily lives with her partner. And but Susan Johnston was married to a Irish British fur trader, Joseph Johnston, and I think that was his name. Emily will correct me in the episode, but and they eventually moved to Bawatang, which is also known today as Sault Ste. Marie, and she had an interesting history. And her name, as her Ojibwe Anishinaabe name, was oh crikey, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because I will do a poor job of pronouncing it. But I think it was Ozwa. No, I'm not going to try it. Sorry, Emily. I will butcher it again if I try it now. But anyways, it's a fascinating look at Native American history, indigenous history in the Great Lakes, and the role of women in the indigenous history and their clans and the tribal history and some of the work that they did, and including for Susan Johnston, it was of operating her own sugar bushes on Sugar Island in the St. Mary's River, and that was for the manufacturing of sugar or maple sugar and maple syrup. So we'll talk about that next week on the North Country History with Rob Berg podcast. So thank you for listening today. Learned a little bit about the Saginaw Forest and its connection with the University of Michigan's School of Forestry. Arthur Hill, a Saginaw, Michigan lumberman, and just tangentially about Philbert Roth. We'll get more into all of this, in future episodes. That's the great thing about the topic that I'm covering here. It's not a finite topics. It won't be something that I'll run out of things to talk about at the end of season 3, which we're in right now. Initially, I looked at maybe 5 seasons, but it could go on longer. It all depends on how much you all want to listen to me. If you enjoy it, as always, tell a friend, pass on that word about North Country History with Rob Berg, your podcast on the forest history of the Great Lakes region. And if you really enjoy it, click on that support button and you can help out financially to keep this on the air. Little as $3 a month. You can help pay, help to make sure this stays on, keep me in my subscriptions to my podcast host, to my music licensing, all of that is necessary to be able to put this production on the air. So thanks for listening. As always, we'll talk to you next week. Have a good week. Bye. North Country History with Rob Berg is hosted, written, and produced by Rob Berg. Music is Crack o' Dawn, performed by Reveille, licensed through Soundstripe. Follow North Country History with Rob Berg on YouTube and on Facebook at Rob Berg, Environmental Historian.